Good evening, it's 7 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Karen, would you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Brink, Commissioner Kubal,
Here.
Commissioner Steeler,
Here.
and Chair Gerard.
Here. We're asked if you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the agenda
So
as
moved.
is or with changes.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from our October 26, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes, on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Next up is 10051, 180th Street North, a septic system setback variance. We're going to hold a public hearing and we'll consider the application. The way this will work this evening, we have actually two public hearings. The city will present the application as they know it, and the planning commission members will ask any questions, clarification that they need. We will then ask the applicant if they would like to say a few words. And then after that, we will have the public hearing, and I'll give some more information how that goes. And then at the end of the public hearing, it'll come back to the planning commission for a decision. So we'll take each one separately, and so we will start with item 6, which is 10051 180th Street North. And I'm not positive, Ken, are you presenting?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
Thank you. As you introduced, we have a variance request this evening for the property at 10051 180th Street North. And it may seem a little confusing, but this property, there we go, hopefully it'll show up on the screens, is located both in the city of Hugo and in the city of Forest Lake. Get the map looking fabulous here. Thank you, Karen. Pull this down. So the property line is crossed through this water body or lake and then drops to the south. The home and the garage are here. The site of the septic system, proposed septic system, is here on the property generally. That part of the site is within the city of Forest Lake. Thus, the variance request is being processed by Forest Lake and not the city of Hugo, even though their mailing address is Hugo. So that's a little bit of background. But the Yangs, the current owners, recently bought the property with the contingency that the septic system be replaced because it is non-compliant. They've escrowed, or there is money escrowed to get that replaced. They've had a plan developed for the septic. Right now, how do I get to the next image, Karen? I had 4. Let me close this. Hang on, I'll find. What did there we go. This is another image of the property, again on an aerial photo. It's a little clearer. All right. And we're turned, but no, we can rotate, right? Where's my rotate?
Yep, so do a right click.
We're gonna rotate this.
Oh, not on that. You should do that. There.
There we go, thank you. So this is a survey of the property. Again, the site of the septic system is proposed here. Again, within the city of Forest Lake and on their site. They've requested several variances or special approvals to install this septic system. The septic, I'm gonna go to the last, probably the most important image. Actually shows we have the same issue. There we go. So this is the proposed new septic system and tanks here going north from the property, or north from the house, up towards 180th Street. The yellow line here is the right-of-way line, just for reference purposes. So they're requesting a variance because the proposed absorption area and the septic area will be within 150 feet of this water body, and that's, actually, it's going to be only 10 feet away from the ordinary high water mark, and the DNR usually requires 150 feet. They will be up to this property line, and in fact, you can see this area encroaches into our public right-of-way as proposed. And the code also requires a 50-foot no disturb buffer along the water body, and some of that may be disturbed. So 3 approvals wrapped up into one to install this new septic. The reason for this request, again, is to replace a non-compliant system, and analyzing it, looking at our variance criteria and the comments from Washington County, our city engineer, and the watershed district were all taken into account. Looking at the property, the location of the well, which is here, septic systems are required to be at least 100 feet away from those. And the shape of the property where all the existing improvements are, there really is no other place on the site that a septic system could fit. So that's why this site was picked, and I've outlined in the report, specifically on pages 3 and 4, the variance criteria and the findings of fact that staff has put together for this case. So, for example, the first criteria is that because of the particular surrounding shape or topographic conditions unique to the property, that would create a practical difficulty. And again, because of the water body, the well, the existing structures, there are practical difficulties here that they did not create. Is the request to use the property in a reasonable manner is our second criteria. They are proposing, again, to build a new septic system on a property with a single-family home and a detached garage. That is a reasonable use of property in this ag district. The plight is of the landowners due to circumstances unique to the property. Again, I touched on that. Shape of the property, location of all the features. It is a very unique property. Even though it's 7 acres, this is the buildable area for this site. Fourth criteria is that the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other landowners or improvements in the area. There are really no neighbors close to this site. There's one to the south and east down 180th. But having a new septic system here certainly will be an improvement and not a detriment. In fact, that rolls into our criteria E, that the variance is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the chapter, and in part, and we look at, does it impair air or water supply, increase traffic, and those kind of things. I would make the case that having a new septic system on a property will provide better protection of the natural resources and the water itself, rather than having a non-compliant system remaining on site. So in summary, staff is recommending approval of this request. We've included a resolution in your packet for your consideration and this again is to approve the variance request to allow the installation of the septic system on the property at 10051 180th Street North. And that recommendation is subject to 7 conditions, again, outlined in the report. Couple of important ones. Number 4, we're recommending that the property owner enter into an encroachment agreement for this proposal. for having part of the absorption area in the public right-of-way. We have drafted that, and that's scheduled to go to the city council next week at their regular meeting. And what that says is that the city will not be responsible for any damage to any of this absorption area that might occur if a city needs to work in this right-of-way or private utilities need to work in that area. Hopefully they can work around it, but we don't guarantee that. So we want to make sure everybody's aware of that situation. And then secondly, the other important condition is the city engineer is recommending that more detailed grading plans be prepared to show exactly how the drainage will occur, especially in the roadway ditch. With that, I'll take questions. The applicants are here, and we can have the public hearing. And as point of reference, after sending out the public hearing notices, I did not get any phone calls or emails or questions from any neighbors about this request.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for staff?
On the survey you have up on the screen right now with the new proposed system, it's, kind of hand-drawn in where this is. I'm assuming that was done by the company that would install this system. And I see, the encroachment over that, the yellow line. In these kind of systems, was the company that drew this sketch, were they aware of that yellow line? Because I would think they could alter that shape to avoid that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, don't know the answer to that, but
Okay.
the applicant may know. I do know, though, they wanted to be parallel to the lake shore, and that was probably more of a driving force
Okay.
to maintain the distance from the water than this encroachment area. That's my educated guess on this.
And from what we're seeing, the encroachment, it's that, I'm seeing 6 feet at the one triangular end and probably, I don't know, it's probably 20 feet long, and that creates a triangle there.
Yeah, right up here.
That's
yes.
the only part encroaching on the right-of-way.
Yes.
If I might add, Commissioner Steeler, the applicant also has to maintain, I believe it's a 100-foot offset from the well.
Right.
And so that is partly why it's kind of pushing that far.
I was just thinking they could narrow it down and keep going and kind of make the mound parallel to that setback of the road set, the yellow line, make the mound parallel to that and extend it further up, and then wouldn't have to maybe encroach 6 feet on, but perhaps it would be then encroaching on toward the lake, so. I understand it's a tight spot. It's probably what they can do, so.
Other questions, Commissioners?
Where is the existing well and what makes it non-compliant?
The existing well,
Or the existing septic?
yeah, the existing well is here. I don't know where the existing septic is, that'd be a great question for the applicant.
What is Washington County's view on this? You have one paragraph in there, and it seems fairly nebulous. Are they going to grant this approval?
They deferred the setback variance question to the city. That's why we're here. As far as permitting the system, it's my understanding that it meets the county's general requirements, but they're holding off until the city acts because it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. They don't want to, the permit's there, as I understand it, but they won't do anything with it until they know the city's okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any last, Susan?
I've got several questions. On the photograph that you have, was that a this year photograph? That showed the lake levels and the shoreline?
I
It's
think-
fairly,
I think that's 2019 or 20. It's not this year.
okay, do we know what the range is between wet season water level, low season water level, and how that affects where we are on the possible impingement on the lake?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we don't have the range, but we have to go by the ordinary high water level, which is established by the DNR, and the floodplain level. And both of those are set numbers that they've established for years. That's the standard we measure from for our setbacks.
Okay. That will be a problem in the future, and I do have some concerns about that. with their encroachment on the right-of-way, this is an area of high snowmobile traffic and high four-wheeler traffic, even though folks are not supposed to be in the ditches. We know that. This area between the road and their mound is going to be compacted. And so it will not function the way it should. And so since you'll have compacted soils on both the upslope area and the compaction, that's going to drive more leachate toward the lake. Usually we have concerns about future water quality and having more nutrients leach into water bodies and adversely affect water quality. Has that been brought up by any of the entities such as the DNR that you've talked to?
That has not, no. I agree, I understand your point, but no, I've not specifically heard that comment.
My other question is, and I don't know, I'm really sorry for the applicant, but my concern is what kind of precedent, and Abby, you may be helpful on this, are we setting that someone can buy a piece of property that has challenges and come to us and say, well, I need variances because I bought this property and it has challenges? I'm really concerned about that precedent moving forward. This is the second septic variance we've had here in 6 months, and I can't remember one in years before this. Could you please help me understand that?
I guess, if Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the first thing I would start with, of course, is every application has to be looked at on their own basis and merits. The extenuating circumstances, practical difficulties, all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty for many of these is if septic systems, as you well know, get 20, 30 years old, they're done. And people have to be able to use their property, and the county is requiring certification of the systems before the sale is completed. If they have a failing septic system, and the buyer is serious about buying the property, and their realtor's here, maybe he can speak to this a little bit, then what do? You gotta be able to use the property in some way. I don't think the city's going to be in a point where we're gonna say you have to abandon the property, you can't live there. So we get boxed in because, as a city, because the properties need a compliant system, and they search, I know they search high and low for the best sites, and then there's soil limitations, slope limitations. You can make the case, yes, it sets a precedent, but do we want that, or do we want failing systems that don't work and cause more pollution that way?
If I might just add one additional thing, one of the things the county does do now with their septic permitting is any new septic system, so on a newly developed lot or a vacant lot where a new home is going to be built and urban services aren't available, the county does require proof that there would be adequate replacement drain field in the future. It's anticipating just this scenario, that what is going to happen in 20 to 30 years if your system fails, where's that secondary system going to go? So I think that there's measures in place now to help us prevent these sorts of circumstances. Unfortunately, with some of these properties, they were built before that requirement, and we're bound with kind of two options: shoehorn something in, which I know isn't the greatest circumstance, or the other option is to not allow for a septic permit to be issued.
I'm not sure that the city has an obligation to allow property uses on any property, regardless of circumstance. Otherwise, we wouldn't have rules about setbacks and things like that. And if we don't have rules that we're going to continue and enforce, then we probably shouldn't have them in place. I'm really torn on this one. I understand the desire of folks to live in this area, and I understand that they may have purchased a property not understanding that it was a failing septic system. I'm not sure where Washington County is going to say, where is your next leach field in 20 years on this particular property? I do have some serious concerns about the appropriateness of this particular field. And one last question. Are we allowed to place pumping requirements yearly? Every other year as a condition of our variance?
I think we could try it, but the question is, how do we enforce it? If they don't get it pumped, are we gonna kick them out of their house? Then how are we gonna monitor those and track those?
If I understand it correctly, the county has a requirement to have it pumped. My buddy just got his septic replaced, and I think it's every other or every third year they're required, and they have to send in forms and all of that stuff that it was done.
I also have a septic system.
You don't get the letter?
Uh-uh.
All right.
Okay. Those are the end of my questions.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, I understand the applicant is here. If you'd like to add anything to this, we ask that you come up, state your name and address for the record. Spend a couple minutes. We may have a couple questions for you then.
Hi, my name is Teresa Yang, and I'm the new owner of 10051 180th Street North in Hugo. And I understand all the, I'm, pretty new at this too, but I'm just, I guess the hardship for us as the landowner is making sure that this is compliance with the city and the county, so if you guys have any questions for us, I can pretty much cover everything up already.
Susan?
Yep.
Ma'am, did they disclose to you that this is a failing septic system and that it would be very difficult to replace?
No, it was in our disclosure saying that there was a bid for a new septic tank, and that a design was being, that it is require a new septic tank. That is not, gotta make sure, yeah. You wanna double check?
A tank is a whole lot different than
Yeah.
the entire either mound or leach field, both in terms of cost and in terms of, especially on this property, the practicality.
Right.
So I'm just concerned for you, ma'am.
Jeff Wall, I'm the Realtor that represented her on the property. So to answer that part of your question, everybody was aware, but part of the issue was that Washington County said that a variance was not required. And then someone else came out, and I can't remember if you have any of that information, and later on in the process told us that it was going to be required. And so that's when we got into this, because in the beginning, no variance was going to be required, it wasn't going to be any issue. And then we found out after the fact, I don't know if the DNR got involved or however else that changed, but do you have a little more on that as well?
The county doesn't grant variances on this type sort of thing, cities do.
And then I'll let Jamie speak as well.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Rooney. I'm the seller's agent. We disclosed right away that the septic system was 70 years old and that likely it was non-compliant, okay? With that said, we immediately started drawing up, working with other septic companies to create designs, to figure out what this might cost and what the plan might be. And we were told originally from the Gustafson Septic Company that a variance may not be needed, and then later, I have an email here from Gustafson stating that Sarah Borrell from the city of, Washington County, said, apologize for the delayed response. She just had an opportunity to review and respond. It was like 6 weeks later. So we closed on the property before realizing that we're gonna have to go through all this, okay? The septic right now is safe, that's currently there, but it's very, very close to what's proposed where the new septic is gonna go. It's very close. I have the design very similar to what you've all seen already. But ultimately, it was disclosed that we thought that this would not be a system that would last very long in this space. Without a new septic system, of course, these folks do not have a place to have a sewer, right? And we want our homeowners to have a safe spot for sewage to go. I don't know, am I missing anything? No? If I can introduce Mike here. Mike actually grew up in this home, and he can give you a little.
Mike Unzi, I grew up at 10051 108th Street North. As far as the traffic, as far as the leach field goes, mentioned snowmobiles, four-wheelers right away. I've lived out there 40-some years. There's been 2 snowmobiles on that particular side of the road. They were mine. It's all field on the other side, very wide open. If there are, the very few that do go by are on the road or on the opposite side of that. The high water marks, as far as all what you're referencing, as far as where it's at today and stuff, that's all been established with the DNR. As far as the 10-year high water mark and the 100-year high water mark, which has got a little bit to do with why the septic, drain field, everything had moved. I don't think that's, any other questions? Or-
Can I get a little history? The house was built on this side of the road a long time ago?
Yes,
Okay, and so it was chosen to be put there along with the septic when things were allowed for that period of time?
correct.
Okay. And you guys, I think, said that the location of the old septic is that it's near where this new one is going to go in. Is there any particular, because when I hear 7 acres, not that I'm recommending this, but I'm wondering, could the option be on the other side of the road for any reason at all? Or is that just way out of line for expense?
Well, that is not our property on the
Okay, so
other side of the
where's the
road.
7 acres then? Because that to me does not.
Separated by, there's a lake in between there.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's like roughly 3 acres and then 5 or so on the other side of the lake where
Okay.
the road kind of goes around. I don't know if there's an aerial view.
You're getting there.
You're getting close.
All this is the 7 acres,
Yeah,
and then this. So, the other high and dry ground is way over here.
okay, all right.
under the lake.
Is there an alternative to a mound, this is a mound system that's being proposed, right?
Correct.
Is there an alternative design other than a mound system that could be located on this lot? That would
I-
not cause,
I guess I'm not the designer of the system. I don't know of, when Josh was out there, did spend a lot of time with him. And for the area that it needs, we have a driveway on the other side and a very small area there. And with the property lines the way they are,
I meant an alternative to that type of system. If there was a system that maybe didn't require the leach field and maybe it would have to be pumped more often. I'm not an
Yeah,
expert in septic systems.
that part of it I'm unaware of.
There is, but they're expensive and they have to be pumped and they're a full containment system and it's challenging for a residential property to have something like
Okay.
that. Gander, when they went in there, had to have a fully contained, literally septic tank.
Okay.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you. We may have questions later.
Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing. We ask if anyone wishes to speak to this issue, that they come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and spend a couple minutes telling us your thoughts on this application. Once we have heard from everybody, we will close the public hearing. We are looking for input tonight. It's not a conversation really between the planning commission and the public. We're looking at your thoughts on this application. And then once we have all of those, then we will close the public hearing and it'll come back for a decision by the planning commission. So with that being said, I will open the public hearing at 7:31. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Karen, do we have anyone online who would like to speak?
Chair Gerard, I have no one online.
No emails came in since the beginning of this meeting?
None to me.
Thank you. Why everyone digest if they really want to come up here or not. I'll ask one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Seeing no one come forward, no one online, we'll close the public hearing at 7:32 PM. Commissioners, discussion, motion, how would you like to proceed?
I have one last question. Ultimately, if we don't approve something like this, we are rendering the property unusable at some point when the septic system fails, which could cause us worse problems with the water quality and things like that. But if we go that route, is an option that I don't want to consider condemning a property for something like this? I mean, is that the ultimate, like, do-all, end-all when we can't approve something?
Chair Gerard, Commissioner Kubal, other commissioners, in the event that the septic system fails and they don't have an adequate means to address their sewage, yes, it would, I mean, I don't know if it's a condemnation, but they'd be in violation of the city code. And in lieu of another option, it would render the property uninhabitable, which I don't know enough right now about legal matters relating to that and whether or not there'd be an implication on the city's part. I know that, I don't want to say that binds us in some way, but I don't know that I have that information. But yes, it would get to the point that that property would not be habitable.
Other comments,
Yeah,
questions?
based on number 2 in here, on the recommendations, that the applicant would still have to go through Washington County and the Rice Creek watershed, which it seemed to me the Rice Creek watershed would be the biggest, they would have the biggest concerns on this. I don't know historically how they look at these things. Do they just go with what the city does? Or will they step in and say, hey, we don't like the proximity to the lake here. We understand the city approved it, but we're going to stand in the way. I'm curious in how they handle these things.
I'm
Mr.
not
Chair,
sure
if I
this one
may?
has an outlet, does it?
Pardon me?
I'm not sure this one has an outlet, does it?
Outlet, the lake?
That I don't know, but we did get comments from the watershed district there on page 3 of your report, and they really didn't have any other concerns other than making sure that erosion control measures were put in place before any grading or site work starts. The county is really the big regulatory authority here, and they have lots of boxes that have to get checked on these, and they're the ones that really want to make sure these systems are permitted, installed, inspected, and operate correctly.
And they won't move unless we grant these variances.
Correct.
Other comments, concerns?
I'm in favor of moving it forward. I'm not, I know it has some issues, but I would love it if we could require some maintenance, deadlines that need to be met, but I understand the issue there. I lived in a community where we had septic systems, and every 2 years you mean, they sent you this, the homeowner association sent you a letter, it's time for your septic system to be pumped. And if you don't do it, we'll do it and send you the bill, basically. So, but I understand it, the city of Forest Lake's not set up that way. But I, you know, they've got a property, they gotta make it usable. And it seems like they've got a system designed here, you know, that's gonna do that.
Geneva?
I'll make a motion to accept the plan, or the recommendation of our staff for the resolution of the variances required and requested with the 7 conditions.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Yep.
Motion carries. So the planning commission is the final word on this. As long as anyone who disagrees with this, they can write a letter to the city. They have 1 week to do so. And if they don't, then in that week time, everything is good to go. You're able to move forward with the next steps. If someone would want to challenge our decision, it would go to the city council, and they will review it and make a final decision. So that's how that works.
Chair Gerard, may I also just add for the record that the city does charge an appeal fee if somebody does want to appeal the decision of this body. So it's a letter and the appeal fee.
How much is the fee?
It's a $200 fee.
All right. You know, I learn something every time I come here.
I just want to make the record clear in case we did blindly
So
get a
if you want to
letter.
appeal this, it'll run you a letter and $200. So we wish you the best on your project. Welcome to Forest Lake. Well, I guess it's actually Hugo, but you can hang out here anyways.
It's complicated.
It is complicated, I'm sorry for you on that.
Thank you for attending this evening. Item number 7, Shadow Creek Estates. It's for preliminary plat, planned unit development, a zoning map, and a comprehensive plan amendment application. We are going to hold a public hearing and consider these applications. And is it, Nathan, are you starting?
That would be me, yes. Thank you, Chair. So we are looking at the preliminary plat here on the screen. This is an application from Todd Christensen, who is with Elmcrest Vistas LLC, which is, he is the applicant and the owner, the applicant for all of these applications and the owner of the, both of the parcels that are within the site area. I think we are all somewhat familiar with the location here of this property. It's known as Shadow Creek Estates. It's located at 6150 202nd Street. The zoning district here is multiple family for both parcels, so the entire site is zoned multiple family. And the future land use designations on this property are split between mixed use and high density residential. So in summary, we're looking at 4 zoning requests here at, or land use applications are part of this. So we're looking at a preliminary plat and a preliminary plan unit development for this project, and we're also looking at some rezoning of a specific area along with a comp plan amendment. And we'll go into detail on all of these. Just as an overview of this site, if you think about it as quadrants, that northeast corner is proposed as single-family homes. The southeast corner is proposed to remain as that existing land use, which is essentially, we're calling it a farmstead. We'll go into more detail there. The southwest corner is proposed to have a multiple family development there with a couple different buildings. And then the northwest corner is proposed to have attached townhomes in the future. And we'll talk about some of the phasing as well later. So the Planning Commission has reviewed this project in its concept plan stage, and it did so over the course of a number of months, starting at least with me in the fall of 2021 and concluding in spring of 2022. That is when the developer received kind of some feedback some preliminary feedback on the project that's in front of us now. And they've incorporated some of that feedback. So just as a reminder to you or refresher, the preliminary plat process is really the time where we work through a lot of those critical development details. These are things like grading and utilities, land uses, a lot of those sort of overarching details over a project area. And so one of the things that I want to start with is with the zoning standards that are proposed for this development, specifically just for those single-family homes in that northeast corner. So I'm gonna have to zoom in here, a little too far. So here in the table within the staff report, I have kind of a comparison of what are the required standards under the city code and what are the requested standards that this developer is requesting for their single-family homes. And I should also mention that the rezoning application that's associated with this project is for that northeast corner of the development where those homes will be. The proposal is to rezone as MXR1, which is the mixed single-family and townhome residential district. So the standards are in the column in the middle there that's saying required standards. You know them well. There's 15,000 square foot minimum lot area, 80-foot width minimum, and so on down the chart there. So there are deviations that are kind of shown in blue on the screen here that are being requested from these standards. So we're looking at a requested deviation from lot area, lot width from 80 to 65, a front yard setback variance or deviation of 5 feet from 30 to 25, a side yard setback deviation of 5 feet, and then we go down to the townhome sites. We are potentially looking at a deviation here for the number of attached homes within one building. The code standard is 8 or more, and they're requesting 4 in their ghost plat, so we've added that. And then I have a question mark on the hobby farm or farmstead where you see grazable acres, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of my presentation. So I would also like to note at the moment that only for the multiple family part of this development, you can only have 2 buildings, 2 principal buildings on one site through a PUD. So I've noted that here in anticipation that we receive a site plan or development in the future should this project move forward. All right. So I'm going to go back to the preliminary plat here and talk a little bit more about these land uses. So we're looking at single family, as I said, that is necessitating the rezoning as well as the comprehensive plan amendment that is with this project. The comp plan amendment would change the future land use map to have a compatible future land use for this single family home land use that they're proposing in this corner. The current designation in the future land use map in our comp plan does not allow for this particular use. So that is why they're applying for that. We're also looking at that PUD again for the ability to deviate from current standards. I would also note to you that the farmstead would continue to be what's called legal non-conforming, very likely due to the fact that they don't meet the grazable acres requirement for livestock keeping under city code. And also the land use is not one of those permitted uses within the existing city code for this zoning district. So let's talk, I'll show you what the rezoning will look like. So again, here is our zoning district. It's just all one zoning district on this site. And again, here's a visual of what that rezoning would look like and the zoning districts. I'll note that in terms of reviewing this site for some of the performance standards that we look at or some of the mitigation things, for example, for woodland preservation, we don't have enough information at this time, and we have requested more information from the developer in the form of a tree survey or a tree inventory on the site. Landscaping, there is no landscaping proposed in this development at this time. However, staff note that landscaping requirements are basically due when development occurs. So in the single family area, you will have landscaping requirements when each lot is built. Folks need to receive to receive their landscape escrow back, they have to install that landscaping appropriately. And then in the southwest corner there where the apartments would be, we would review landscaping and ensure that it meets city requirements at the time it is developed. The staging of this development, so the developer is looking to plat everything you see here except for Outlot A, which is in that northwest corner. So these would all be platted at the same time. Development of the single-family homes would start in 2023. And then your development of the multifamily buildings, there'd be two. One of them would be constructed beginning in 23 as proposed, and then the next in 24. In terms of parkland dedication with developments, the city has the ability to require dedication of land or cash. In this case, the developer has requested a cash in lieu payment to fund the city's park system. Staff do agree that would be appropriate given the proximity of this development to Southview Park. The Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission also agrees. They made a motion at their October meeting to recommend cash in lieu fee for this development. There are notably trails that are proposed throughout this development. So a trail would run from the, I think this is called Street A here, up to Southview Park. And then from this intersection of the trail as proposed and Street A to effectively Goodview. So it would run kind of how you see the cursor moving just south of the wetland to make that connection to a current existing trail. The developer is requesting not to construct that second segment we talked about between Street A and Goodview at this time. They're basing that on the fact that it is not currently needed. I would also mention that the Parks Commission motion to require that both of those connections be established with the first phase of this development. So I'm going to pause there if you have any questions for me on some of this stuff before I talk about the comp plan amendment.
Questions for staff? Susan?
A real basic one. Right now, Shadow Creek spreads manure on that entire western half of the property. Looking at the amount of the farmstead that is going to be impervious surface, you're gonna have probably a maximum of 4 horses allowed there, 2 horses per acre, but that does not provide any place for manure management. And trust me, they do.
Yeah, so I can just say this, and maybe this would be another part of the conversation to have again as we discuss the overall project, but we have requested more information from the developer on the operation of the farmstead to really help us understand what are we looking at here from a consistency standpoint with our zoning ordinance.
Well, also with the neighbors, because there are homes, both existing and many more proposed in the area, and it will be a challenge. I guess, when do you want us to talk about or ask questions about their requested deviations?
So what I'd suggest is just let's put a pin in those, and I'll get through the rest of my presentation. I just wanted if there are any clarification questions on some of this stuff. I'm going to move through this comp plan amendment part.
Before you go there, Nathan.
Yep.
So the plan here is that, I think this is about a 40-acre site total. Is it 30?
Approximately.
30 or 40, doesn't matter. Is it going to be all one PUD, or is he doing a lot split here and having part of it be MXR1 and part of it being a PUD?
That is a good question. So we are looking at a preliminary PUD for this entire site.
Okay,
So that is how we're reviewing this at this time.
thank you. Susan?
And one last question. On what you've got on the map right now, is the proposed trail to go across the northern boundary of the property? The trail connection to Goodview?
Yeah, so there would be, as proposed, there will be a trail that runs from where the cursor is on Southview Park down and connects to Street A, and then that trail would cross Street A and continue on south of this wetland you can kind of see on this final plat, or this preliminary plat, excuse me, and it would connect then with Good View south of that wetland. That's where that connection would be located.
My concern with that is that if it's not done as part of the original, and gets pushed off, it will be pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And so my concern is if there is an intention to have a trail there, that it be part of the development and the paving and the everything else that goes on with that first construction in the northeast quadrant. It makes sense to have those amenities taken care of that are associated with that area to be taken care of and built at the time that area is put together.
Noted.
As long as we're discussing access there, the sidewalk that is on the west side of Street A,
Yep.
that would be constructed under initial, all the way from
Yes, you're right. So
50 all the way back up to Good View in the middle of the development there.
yeah, and thank you, Chair, for noting that there is a sidewalk proposed on the west side of Street A. That entire length of the sidewalk and that public infrastructure would all be built with the first phase of this development right away.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions of staff at this point? Geneva?
What's the timeline for, or even if there is a plan for putting in a stoplight at that section where there's just the crosswalk now? Partly because that's a dangerous intersection even now for people walking across there. And if we're going to be putting in a lot more apartments, which to me also suggests families and children and people moving around, I think that's highly dangerous. So do
Are you
we know?
referring to a crosswalk where
On
there's the trail?
202nd on 61.
Okay.
If I might just touch on that a little bit. Right now, there aren't plans for changing that intersection, but our understanding is the county and MnDOT have been in discussions about intersection alterations. I don't know their timeline at this point, and neither of those bodies have indicated that this development would be responsible for an intersection change at that point. The control, either a light or a roundabout or something at that intersection.
Yeah, and, you know, the person that's putting all of this together might not be very concerned about that, but I do think after people start moving in and the traffic starts flowing, that's when the questions come and a child gets hit by a car and all of a sudden it's a really big to-do and you don't want to have a child hit by a car. I mean, it's really, I think it's troublesome over there even now without all the additional traffic.
We heard that at the neighborhood meeting as well. Yep.
Okay. Why don't you
All right.
continue, Nathan?
That sounds good. Thanks, Chair. So we are also, as I said, processing a comprehensive plan amendment with this request. That is to allow for that single-family land use in the northeast corner. What you see on the screen here is the current guidance from the comp plan. This is from the future land use map. The guidance for the parcel on, that'd be Highway 61 there, is mixed use. And the guidance for the rest of this parcel is high density. That would be on the east chunk of the parcel. The proposal is to reconfigure the guidance in the comp plan to allow for that single-family use in the north part of this development, and then to also recognize that really given some of the constraints of the project or some of the requirements for it, we would then, we're seeing a request to change to high density for the rest. This recognizes the fact that it will likely be residential in the Outlot A section, or where those townhomes were going to be or are going to be. And it also creates a guidance that is more similar to what is currently existing in the comprehensive plan, as opposed to other configurations you might see, which would be maybe just changing the northeast corner to low to medium. So in the staff report, I have a table that summarizes or estimates the impacts on density, just as a way to understand what that change may mean. And I want to just caveat here this by saying, the calculation here would lead us to expect fewer homes than what you see, or fewer units than what you see in this table, because we used gross land area here and not the net developable area, which is actually the realistic expectation. So what you're seeing in this table, just to summarize, is 60 to 90 units fewer with the proposed comp plan amendment than with the existing comp plan guidance. So given that this proposal seeks to kind of balance the expectations for density with the preservation of the agricultural farmstead use, and also with the realistic expectations for the development of this property, it is seen as a reasonable request. We, I should say, have asked the Met Council for some information on what we should expect from their review. I don't know that we've received anything from them yet regarding that, but comp plan amendments first are approved by the city, and then after they're approved by the city would then go to the Met Council for review. Typically, the Met Council is going to be looking for consistency with regional plans. So that is the information on the comp plan amendment. I'll be happy to answer questions on that in a few minutes. I just want to cover some of the other comments that we have received internally from staff. And I'll kind of park it here while I do that. So the city engineer provided a memo, which I've summarized some of those really key comments for you in the staff report. I'm just going to go through a couple of them. Number one, Washington County is being consulted on the location of Street A, that access where it meets 202nd. Their coordination has been very critical to this development throughout the entire review from concept forward. And they have a letter that the developer has received, and the developer is expected to be working with them on the location of that access. Rice Creek Watershed District, at the time of writing this report, and I'm not sure if the developer has since made a submission, but they don't have a submittal yet from the developer for this development. So we don't have any comments from them yet on their review of the development. We know that those are important, obviously, with some of the developments occurring in the city with wetlands and things of that nature. I know that they're also working through some of those wetland boundary issues at the moment. So not quite sure where that is yet. No permits in with the watershed, and that is strongly suggested by staff. And then the developer is requesting, through their proposal, some flexibility to established engineering standards, and those are listed in your in the summary of the engineer's comments there. Public Works comments were rolled into the engineering comments. The fire chief doesn't have any comments at the moment, but we do expect when, for example, the multifamily properties come in, that there will be some thoughts from the fire chief on those development. I kind of summarized the watershed, and then the county again provided a memo to the applicant here. Notably, left turn lanes will be required into the development. And the developer has been made aware of that requirement. So now we get to the public comments. And so as Abby kind of said, the neighborhood meeting, staff did hear a number of things. The neighborhood meeting was held on Wednesday, October 26th. About 17 residents showed up. And to Commissioner Kubal's question, traffic concerns were raised by community members, including the safety of the intersection. There were also questions or concerns on site grading and stormwater, management of Hardwood Creek, and safety and improvements at Southview Park. And so a public hearing was posted for this project, and the public hearing you're holding tonight is for is the public hearing at the Planning Commission level. There will be another public hearing held at the City Council level for this comp plan amendment, but I would note that now is a very critical time to be taking in public comments on this project. So as I mentioned, staff do not recommend any formal action this evening. That is because we have requested additional information from the developer. One of those things being a woodland preservation plan. Another one of those things being a lot more information on the farmstead use so that we can more clearly understand what's going on there and how to kind of review this rather unique request. So with that being said, I'm happy to stand for your questions or turn it over to Abby if they're more appropriate for her.
Could you, before we go to questions, can you bump down a couple slides? I think it's slide 32, which shows the whole development, kind of what the apartment's not there, but the additional housing and the townhomes, and how the farm will look when we're done.
Yeah, and so one thing I'd like to note right off the bat here is this is called a ghost plat. This is just sort of how the developer envisions, maybe this is a concept of how it may end up developing, not a promise or anything the city would hold them to necessarily. But we would review against it and make approvals accordingly. So the villa lots you see here, I'll call them, they're in the blue numbering. Those would not be part of any future development. The city has talked to this developer and understanding there's issues with land area and stuff, that area would be just combined and that would just be a contiguous, we'll call it farmstead site. So those would not be able to be platted in the future. However, this is an image of what those attached townhomes would look like.
And then the apartments go to that. Can you point out where the apartments would be?
Yeah, so the apartment buildings would be located on this parcel here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chair Gerard, if I might just also state for the record that, as Nathan had mentioned, the ghost plat just to the northeast of the farm site would go away. The intention being that the farm site, the paddocks for the horses, all of that would be retained as its own site, and that should this come back someday for future development, it's more than likely to be at the point that that farm site, that those operations are going to completely go away. So at that point, then the city would see an entirely new amendment to the PUD to determine what kind of appropriate use goes there that fits with the comp plan at that time.
Thank you. Questions for staff? On the comp plan part of it? Let's start with that. Susan?
I'm really confused. Because, well, on a couple of things. When we've had talks about the MXR and we said, well, could we do a comp plan amendment so that not as much of our city, right, is that was done at the last moment is MXR with the very high densities, and a comp plan amendment was said to be very, very difficult to do. And in addition, the Planning Commission has heard strong staff recommendations for increasing density, especially through the MXR process and changing the MXR guidelines to get increasing density. And so I'm surprised that that the city may look at going to the Met Council for a significantly decreased density, and that we're going for a comp plan revision. So I guess I'd like to better understand why there's a recommendation, I'm assuming this is a recommendation of staff, because you've been working with the developer to go for much lower density than we're pushing for on the MXR.
If you don't mind, Nathan.
Instead of going with our MXR requirements.
It's a very understandable and very good question, Commissioner Young. Nathan, if you could pull up that, thank you. So if you actually don't mind going to what the existing land use is. So currently, right now, this is our existing future land use map. The future land use map is calling for about 26 acres of high-density residential that would border both 202nd and Goodview. It would also border those single-family residential homes in the backyard. The mixed-use district along the highway allows for a combination of both residential and commercial. So in discussions with the developer, and if you could flip to the next slide, please, Nathan, we talked about the inclusion of that low to medium density residential, that MXR1 that we are talking about modifying, to gain neighborhood compatibility more than anything with the existing residential that's backing up behind that property. Even though there is a reduction in density, it isn't we don't believe that this is a significant enough reduction in the density that's going to affect a comprehensive plan amendment or alter the city's housing density goals. This is not a city-initiated comprehensive plan amendment. This is a developer-initiated comprehensive plan amendment. Our role in it, the commission's role in it, is to review the applicability to determine if this is appropriate for Forest Lake. From staff standpoint, when we're looking at it, yes, we talk about density, we talk about it balancing as the community as a whole. We were concerned, and this commission was here when this comp plan was adopted. Most staff wasn't. We had some concerns for placing much higher density residential right behind the low-density single-family residential.
On the other side of Goodview, that we have had neighborhood folks saying that the MXR density was not where it butts up against some of the existing places. That wasn't a problem then, to have the higher density and the smaller lots and the smaller separation between houses. It wasn't an issue on the other side of Goodview. What makes that important on this side of Goodview? Because again, you have existing residential butting up against new, higher density existing residential, and
Commissioner Young, yes.
I'm trying to understand.
Sure, it's a very valid question. The property to the north is guided at what we could probably call a lower density residential. It's no doubt and no secret that behind this, so what's being proposed there, that low to medium density residential, does have smaller lots. We do have narrower setbacks. The idea was that that was more consistent with the existing low density residential than high density residential, truly high density, where we're balancing 15 to 20 units per acre. We're balancing apartment buildings, that sort of thing, in the backyard of those single-family residential. Staff, in looking at this request, and we have lots of time for discussion of this one, really thought that the natural environmental barrier there, I think it's a creek that's running through there, and forgive me for not knowing exactly what that drainage system or creek is, that's bordering that low to medium density residential is shown in here, and the high density residential was a good breaking point for gaining that neighborhood compatibility. It's certainly up to this commission to make recommendations if they don't think otherwise, but what we are trying to do is to help ensure that if a comprehensive plan amendment is going to be reviewed, that we're not reducing that kind of net density too much.
Other questions for staff?
I don't know if it's so much a question as a comment. So we've been recently going through all this MXR1
Yeah.
and the proposed draft recommendations. And so I'm looking at the requested standard of this new neighborhood, and I see, you know, a lot area of 7,800 square feet. And I think our discussions have said 7,500 is okay, which I'm okay with that. And I look at the lot width of 65 feet, and that falls within, I think that matches what we've discussed here. I'm okay with that. The 25-foot setback front yard, it matches what we've discussed. But then I get to the side yard setback, and they're looking for 5 feet. And we've had a struggle between here agreeing on 7.5 feet being acceptable. So I would want to draw the line and say, no, 5 feet's not okay. We're going to stay with 7.5.
Minimum.
Minimum, yeah.
And we agree with that as well. There was some conflicting information on the application that was submitted where at points it did indicate 7.5 and others 5. So that is something that we've noted to the developer that we need to gain the consistency in his application for those items.
And I think to Don's point, since MXR1 changes are fairly imminent, if we change this, I think that they ought to pretty much line up with those. So even 30 to 25-foot front would be for the house in my mind, and 30 for the garage.
And quite frankly, if we're requiring MXR everywhere else with the higher density and the smaller lots, then I don't understand why we're carving this one out. I really don't understand that. Having listened to the concerns of staff and listening to their concerns about how even on the southern end of the city, having some changes to density requirements would be received by the Met Council. This just puzzles me. A second question, I understand that there can only be 2 high-density apartment complexes on what's going to be the southwest corner. Is there a limitation right now on how big they can be or how high they can be, except for the airport requirements? And I think this is just outside
Sure.
the airport flight zone.
I can comment on that. So the high density, or the multiple family district, which is how it will remain zoned, has some functional limits to the massing of these buildings. So there is a height limit in the city. If they wanted to exceed that, they would have to make a request to amend this PUD. And if they wanted to kind of vary from other standards, it would be the same process. So they would have to come back through the city to receive approval if they wanted to deviate from what's already allowed in the city code. They would also be expected to go through site plan review when they come in with their application.
So they could put the 2 fairly significant 5-story buildings on those 2, on that lot.
Yeah, so they'll come in with the site plan application, they being the apartment developers, not this particular developer who's applying for this project. They will come in with a site plan. Staff will look at that at a kind of a concept level right away and provide an assessment of, okay, looks like you're meeting or not meeting city standards. And then if their development as proposed meets the city standards for multiple family buildings, then it would still be a site plan review application and you would still review that as written in code now. Or they would also have to apply, so they would, if they didn't meet the city standards, they would have to still apply for site plan review and then amend the PUD to allow for additional deviations.
And so there are 5 acres there. How many dwelling units would you expect in that apartment site then?
They're
Between
proposing,
the 2 buildings?
in the narrative, the developer is stating 130 units. That would then be split, we're assuming, in half. So you're looking at, what is that? 65 units per building.
And then Commissioner Young, just to answer your question about height, the base zoning district would have a maximum height of 45 feet, 4 stories. Now, I'm not sure if the applicant would go that high or not.
Oh, we're talking 5 on the downtown, 5 stories on that,
But that's the downtown
Right.
project. That's just that project.
and the one across is 4 or 5? The brand new one,
They're 4 stories.
yeah,
Both of the new ones are 4.
okay.
And just thinking about typical multifamily applications, 4 stories would seem typical, what you would expect.
Any other questions for staff? And the applicant is not present this evening, correct?
No, the applicant is not here this evening.
So we will open the public hearing. And since all of you were here for the first public hearing, it'll work the same. We will open it formally. We ask if anyone wishes to speak to this application, please come up, state your name and address for the record. Spend a couple minutes giving us your thoughts on this project. When we have heard from everyone, we will close the public hearing. Again, we are looking for input from you on this application, and it's not necessarily a dialogue between us because our role is trying to figure out what's going on here. So with that, we open the public hearing at 8:14 PM. Does anyone wish to speak to this application?
Well,
hi there. My name is Sadie Chester. I live with my husband and daughter, who you keep sneaking in the back there. We live at 6275 202nd Street North, so directly across from the horse farm or the 9-acre little sliver there. We just moved in July of this year, and so my husband's actually from the area, and we're really happy to be in his hometown and raise our family here. And so obviously we're very keen on this project since it's directly across the street from us. And some thoughts that I wanted to share here. As it's already been stated, one of the main concerns we had from our neighborhood meeting last time was around the infrastructure in the area. Being able to directly see the road itself, 202, and what goes on there typically, that is a very fast road itself. I watch the high school kids run donuts in between Goodview and 202 right in front of our house, probably on a daily basis. And going up to 61, where that intersection is, absolutely, it's very scary. I've tried to take my daughter across the street to the library, and it's been kind of harrowing trying to run the stroller across the road. So personally, I really feel that if there's going to be any major development in this area, the infrastructure in that area needs to be addressed first before we're going to introduce more families there. It very much concerns me to Susan's point, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't see her.
Geneva.
Thank you very much. To her point about, a kid getting hit, and when I look at this plan here, the idea of having these 2 apartment buildings right on that corner there, and I just keep thinking, even just like if there's a fence or something, it's gonna be, I think, too close to that highway to be safe, at least at this time with the way the infrastructure is. I'm also concerned overall with the construction itself and that future noise of future families around the horse farm itself. We had spoken with the previous neighbors, and she had made comments about even the road noise with kids flying down that street, that it would disrupt horse lessons and sometimes cause bucking and the horses to toss riders off. And I know there's a lot of partnership with the school. I'd be really concerned about just the safety of that overall experience for people taking horse lessons and when the shows happen, just as a consideration for that kind of dual use of the overall land. Related to that, with the agriculture in the area and with the construction, and to your point around the manure and piece, there's a kind of a two-way street with that. With the horse waste and all of that, we need to be thinking about the safety of the families that would be in that area. There could be concern with runoff. But then on the other side of the coin as well, during construction, would any runoff affect the wetlands that are in that area, the ag land? Will that affect the livestock that's there? Those are things that I would be thinking about at that time. And then just as a a couple of final points here related to the comp plan itself. I read the comp plan in preparation for this overall piece. I am no expert by any means, but a couple of things stood out to me. One is at the very beginning of the comp plan, it talks about the natural resources of Forest Lake being kind of the crown jewel that we're trying to protect and preserve. And I think that's really important when thinking about this particular project and this horse farm that seems to be very well known in this area. I'm new, so I'm still learning, but it seems to be, a treasure of Forest Lake that is unique to this area. And envisioning apartment buildings surrounding this and these, houses kind of jam-packed around this property, to me kind of detracts away from that goal of preserving this area. And right across the street, there's all that great development that's happening around the library and the Y. And I think continuing to invest in that area makes a lot of sense. But this particular property here, it just doesn't make sense at this time. Which at the second point, and I know this isn't the discussion necessarily, but looking at the original goal of the high density plot here, to your point, why are we changing that? It also asks the question, why was it originally set as a high density future land use property itself? To me, it's suggesting that it needed to guarantee that the horse farm would be destroyed in order to have that overall use of the future land. So I'm wondering if now is the right time for all of this to occur, or if maybe in the future this could be a better discussion regarding the overall use of the horse farm itself. And from the last meeting, the developer indicated that there was no intention of getting rid of the horse land so long as he was still around. And so again, I wonder if this is just really the right time to even start looking at this again from the infrastructure side of, having more families in that area. And then overall, just that horse farm being the core and the heart of that overall property itself. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this application?
Hello, my name is Richard Latecki. I lived in Forest Lake for 25 years. Address is 20630 Georgia Avenue. I live in that Southview development where it's low density. I have the park right in my backyard. The park's been there for 25 years. We used to have playground equipment back there, but the issue was we had kids going back there vandalizing and doing inappropriate things.
Unhealthy.
Unhealthy, yes, thank you. So the thing is, we'd see that activity, my dog would recognize the people back there, be barking at those people. For him to put in the high-density property right next to a low-density property and then have a park that's gonna come up there, how are you gonna manage that park area? Because I know the policemen had a lot of difficulty in finding that park, because when you call them up, they had no clue where it was. You literally had to walk them down to the path, down to the park. By that time, the juveniles were gone at that point. The other point I want to bring up too is at the intersection of 202 and 61, my son was involved in an accident there. It totaled our car. So without lights there, without any kind of control, you do have a lot of people speeding up and down that road that's 50 miles an hour. Granted, I know we don't have any control over that speed limit there, but the thing is, you have to understand, when you have that paved road, high traffic in the morning, bus traffic, commuters, everyone's trying to get out to Highway 61, that becomes an issue. The other thing is on that creek that's in the area, that creek has tendency of flooding at times. And I know the previous owner had have a excavator go out there and remove some of the debris out of that creek. That creek goes to Clear Lake. So if you think about all the nutrients going into the creek, flowing somewhere, it's gonna go to where? Clear Lake. The other issue too, you brought up about the manure. Yes, we do smell the manure. That's the great outdoors. They do spread it on other areas, so that low density area where they show as far as those homes, they have spread manure there because there is times where they had an excess amount of manure there to put somewhere. The other question I have is how come that property became high density where everything else around it is low to medium density?
I don't honestly know exactly how it got to be high density. I know that this started back when the adolescent treatment center was going to go in there. And I think that's when some of this happened. I don't know when the back end happened.
Well, even
The east
before
end,
them.
I'm sorry.
When the Pratt development came in, and that whole very large
Brattle Pass,
planning.
Brattle Pass area?
Pardon me?
The Brattle Pass area?
Not so much Bridle Pass, on the other side of the road,
Okay.
where you now have the Y
Oh, okay.
and those things. As part of that whole visioning that goes all the way past Fenway to the east, and then to 61, and then it was envisioned of there would be and one of my questions is that there would be the convenience store on the southwest corner of 202nd and 61, and that whole node of 202nd and 61 on all four corners, as much as the airport would allow, would all be high density, because you wouldn't expect to have a lot of homes wanting to live under flight paths. And so, the single-family homes, whereas with an apartment, you're not doing an outdoor, it's not a barbecue in the backyard with the planes flying over. So that whole area for quite a while, even before the youth facility was brought to the city, was envisioned as a sort of a high-density node. On the other side, when the Pratt development, that was to be apartment buildings and then commercial. The original plans were grocery store and things like that.
Okay.
And you generally, good planning would do high density near the highway and then taper it off as you go farther out, be quieter and whatnot. So very typically, you'll see on these more corridors that you'll see more high density.
So you're referring to Highway 61, correct? Okay, so then as far as that northwest corner, when you look at the lot size, when the gentleman spoke, I think his name was Todd Christensen, he made a comment about as far as how many houses and the acreage that they would have. He gave the math and he said it was 1/4 of an acre. When you start looking at the actual numbers that he gave us, it was like 1/5 of an acre for each of the properties for those houses to be on. Now, with our homes that we have in Southview, we had to be 10 feet off the line on the side. And they gave us an excuse, we had to have enough room to drive a fire truck between your houses.
Yes.
So with this revised plan of 5 feet, how are you gonna get a truck between the two homes if you have to get there?
Right.
We know.
Okay.
That was the 7.5-foot discussion that you heard earlier.
Oh, yeah,
up
yes,
here.
I heard that. So I'm just concerned about that. And then the final note I was gonna ask too, on this developer, has anyone looked at far as his previous developments that he has proposed and built to see what they look like?
No, staff has not done that. We don't generally research the development companies that are proposing development within the community.
They are allowed to develop. They come with a plan that's acceptable. They are allowed to develop.
But is there a plan that's gonna fit our community?
A plan that will be approved by the city.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to this application?
My name's Todd Schultz. I just bought a house at 6470 204th Street. I'm from Champlin originally. They went with, in my neighborhood, when I bought a house there, went with the small lots. Caused problems. Bike paths, trails had to be 10 feet for the cop cars to get through. Caused more, in the beginning it was good. About 6 to 8 years later, my neighbor started finding drug paraphernalia behind his fence. So more cops had to start driving up and down the bike paths. Now I moved to St. Augustine and they rag about the traffic. And you all know better than I do that 61, I'll turn around, go up to the, if I'm gonna go south on 61, I'd go up to the roundabout up by the high school. Cause that, you all know better than I do, it's dangerous. And they bitch about, and they squawk about the traffic down there. And I told them last week, I said, don't squawk about the traffic, cause that's bad. I was looking real hard at Cottage Grove, farming community, just like you guys got here. My daughter got me to come up here and I seen this side and I go, wow. Horse ranches, buffalo ranch, farm fields. So I bought. And apartments, I lived in apartments when I was a kid, that's what my mom could afford. That don't bring a good clientele after apartments have been used for, doesn't take that many years. And I don't know if these are gonna be Section 8s or not, but my experience living in them, they weren't good for Osseo when I was living in there, and they weren't good in Anoka when they built them brand new ones off of 7th Avenue. And they've got nothing but problems in there right now. So I'm not for this thing, but thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Pam Quaston. I live at 20432 Goodvine Trail North. And I just want to piggyback on what everyone is saying. Today, I'm actually in my house 11 years in Forest Lake here. And I moved up here to be closer to my family who is up here. And truly enjoyed the openness that was up here, no longer that. The biggest concern I have is the Highway 61 202nd roadway, of course. There's been 5 accidents, major accidents since I've lived here with that intersection. And one was an airlift, which is very detrimental. So I'm very concerned about that. With all the if there's new homes, there's families, young families with children, not good. The other issue that I have is the closest of the homes. I live, the home that I have, my neighbors are 10 feet from me, which is fine, but it's still close. I can't imagine putting houses any closer together than that. I just can't imagine. And then the other issue that I have too is, again, the apartment buildings so close to the highway. And we really enjoyed the airport here. We enjoyed the parachuting. Can't do that anymore now with the apartment buildings that are built on that section over there. So it's just taken away from kind of the reason why people moved here to Forest Lake, the openness, like they said, the farmland and things like that. So I just wanted to share that. I'm in agreement with all my other community members here. So thank you for hearing us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the application? Karen, do we have anyone online who wishes to?
Chair Gerard, I have no one online.
Any emails to read?
I have not received any emails.
I'll ask one more time if anyone wishes to speak to this application. This will be the one public hearing on this development as such for the preliminary plat. There will be one at the city level for the comprehensive plan, but this is the time and the place for the application for the actual platting of the property as such. So that's one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing at 8:32 p.m. Bring it back to the commissioners. Susan?
I agree with the city engineer's review on the driveways on Goodview, that they're just too close to the 202nd intersection, especially, I live due east of here, and when I need to go to the high school, that whole area with just the driveways and the streets that are there is challenging. So I do have some concerns about the driveways on Goodview and making sure that they do meet our minimums and not what the developer is proposing on those driveway entrances. Forest Lake has been very fortunate over time with our requests to Washington County and to MnDOT for large infrastructure, road infrastructure issues. We know that we have a significant amount of new housing, fairly high density, MXR density, going east of Goodview in that Goodview 202nd area. With this, it usually takes 5 to 7 years to get funding and plans for, I think Washington County is looking at a roundabout at 61 and 202nd. I think it would be beneficial for our policymakers to be intervening with MnDOT and Washington County to see if we can move that up and push that up on their priority list, because it is going to be a challenge. The street that they're, the north-ish, south-ish street, the property to the south here was, like I said, convenience store, stop and rob, whatever you want to call them. That property will be developed, but it's really important that we take a look at where this road comes in and how that's going to interact with that property when it's going to develop. now that we're getting a really significant amount of dwelling units, both on the Pratt area, on Goodview between 202nd and the high school, significant more development to the east of Goodview, the folks that look at those properties for those kind of uses, it's gonna come up on their algorithms as being much more desirable. So, I mean, for glory's sake, if you could put a Caribou at that really weird intersection at 35 and 97 and have that be successful, you've got a whole lot more steering wheels that go by that 61, 202nd intersection. I don't understand. So I'm really concerned about how we're going to make sure that whatever is put in here will be compatible with what's going to be needed to serve that, I think it's 10 acres on the southwest side, or southeast side of 202nd and 61. This is a rapidly growing area in the city, and traffic and infrastructure is going to be a big challenge.
Thank you. Other comments?
Nathan, Richard had mentioned a creek running through the area, and I don't see, maybe you can pull up one of the maps, it goes along where the path is, the future trail? It kind of follows that?
A fair question. Let me zoom in here. So you can see there's wetland 4 here.
Right.
The creek roughly follows this path here where the cursor is moving, so it would go presumably under Street A and then up. The drainage runs to the north here through this site.
Okay. And it
That's
continues on?
It does continue on.
Yeah.
Southview Park is actually a very wet park. The city actually did a drainage infrastructure project in cooperation with the Watershed District in that area.
We've done a lot of work on the what's called the northwest quadrant with MnDOT and the county and us and landowners, and as far as Silverda's property has had challenges with drainage because of that area.
Yeah, if I might just make a general comment, that area is a particular focal point of grading review, so there's certainly attention being paid to that area.
I'll make a motion to table this application until the city gets all of the information that they need. Is there a deadline you need, date-wise?
Nope, I think just tabling consideration is sufficient at the moment. One thing that if you don't mind me just noting for the record, because the Planning Commission won't have additional notifications of when this will be coming back, I'll have my business card on the table for anybody who wants it that doesn't already have it. Send me an email. We can put you on the notification list of when this comes back to this body. Then we can help kind of facilitate at least that communication with the neighborhood so that they can still continue to be a part of this review process.
There's a motion.
Second. I'll motion.
It's been a motion, second. It's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. So to Community Development Director Whitman's comments, we've had our public hearing now, and that's when you get notified that this is going to come to us. But we tabled this discussion tonight, so there'll be no more discussion on it this evening, but it will come back to us for approval or denial at a later date. And since we've had the public hearing, that is when the notifications come out to the surrounding neighborhood. So I would recommend getting the business card to make sure you get the email that says, here's the next time that it'll be coming to us. Will they get notified for the comprehensive plan?
Yes, so a similar notice would go out that they would, that anyone within 350 feet of the standard of the property that's subject here.
So there's two very different things going on. There's a comprehensive plan, which the city will deal with, that will not be at the planning commission.
This body will make recommendation, but the council is obligated to also hold a hearing.
Right.
So we'll send a new written notification, very much like the meeting notice for tonight.
And that'll be for the comprehensive plan changes, but this preliminary plat will come back to the planning commission. So I hope it's clear as mud to you out
So
there.
if I can just state for the record, this is the first public meeting. So we had our neighborhood meeting a little over a week ago, I think. It was kind of the first engagement with the neighborhood. This is the first public meeting with an appointed or an elected body. There will be a number of them, potentially with this commission, but also with the city council before any formal action, be that to approve or deny, would be made.
Can I also just build on to that one point on process? These applications are going to, we expect, move concurrently together back to the planning commission and then ultimately to the city council, so.
Susan?
And Chair Gerard, do you think it is fair to say that the MXR discussion that we're going to be having next on our agenda, which will drive the development to the east of Goodview, might be of interest to the folks that are here tonight?
It may be of interest. It's a little dry, but you're welcome to stay. You know, we always like when the.
You just crushed Debbie. How could you say that?
We've been at this for a year and a half.
So we will move to the comprehensive plan code amendments. The city of Forest, let me preempt Abby on this. The city of Forest Lake is being required by the Met Council to increase our density through our comprehensive plan
There we go.
in order to increase our sewer.
So, go ahead, Chair.
Go ahead.
I'll be quiet, go ahead, Abby.
The city, were there folks here that are gonna listen? Okay, so the city is a part of the metropolitan region. And Karen, would you mind, excuse me for just about calling you Sharon. Karen, would you mind sharing my screen, please? The city of Forest Lake is a part of the metropolitan region, and as part of the metropolitan region, oh, this happened to me before once.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that, for whom technology
That
is not
one-
always my friend.
That always happens here, and I just don't, give me a second. Right? I always want to be there. It is multiple displays? No. Goodness gracious. I'm so sorry.
No, the area of density that we submitted in our comprehensive plan, unreasonable, but it is by the small buildings.
Do you know
Here,
what
Abby.
Have you done it before?
Yeah, I have. It's okay.
That's the requested developers.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Whoopee-ki-yay.
It's a PowerPoint. It's sitting on my,
You just don't like houses.
And then where's your PowerPoint? Is it down here?
There's a reason I bought a property that could never be
All
subdivided.
right, and then if you want to
Because none of
present,
the
you can
property
just do
around can be
that
subdivided.
option. It should, there we go.
oh, there we go. Gosh.
None of those properties can be subdivided.
Thank you.
Here, was it the covenants and restrictions?
Okay,
on
quick,
that?
high level for the audience that stuck around. We are a part of the metropolitan region, and as part of the metropolitan region, we have to update our comprehensive plan every 10 years. We update that comprehensive plan, and our comprehensive plan needs to be consistent with the Metropolitan Council's goals. Part of those goals is to meet certain density standards for our community classification as an emerging suburban community. So while, yes, we can say that part of this is Met Council requirements, we also adopted these provisions in our comprehensive plan, and we said that we would find ways to increase density, specifically by looking at a few different things. Our mixed residential district alteration, as we started with these zoning code changes and just talking about the comp plan for code changes for consistent with comp plan. We've also looked at some agricultural compatible land uses, and then review of the Highway 61 mixed use corridor. So as a brief reminder, the areas that we're really looking at is that MXR1 district, and yes, it does encompass a significant portion of the future urbanized residential development. It does not include those areas that are not a part of the urbanized residential areas. So some of that rural residential district or the ag district areas that will not be serviced by sewer and water in the future. It is a very large area within the community, however. So as part of this, we've talked about all the different things about MXR1.
Could you tell them what colors we're talking about with the MXR? Because
Yep, we're talking about the peach, the peach area. So just for reference, this is Shadow Creek. So pretty much everything to the east and south, even some of the subject properties here tonight of the landowners. This would be.
Abby, you don't have any pointer here that tells them where Shadow Creek is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was, of course,
We know where it is.
right
There
here.
we are.
There's Shadow Creek. Everything that's peach is the MXR1 district, so all of the areas to the east of Shadow Creek, just to the south. We're also looking at the Headwaters development area and just to the south of Headwaters as well. We have a little bit of pocket up in the northwest corner as well of the city. So it does represent a pretty large land area right on the fringe of that more traditional urban community and more traditional rural community. So as part of that discussion, we've talked about garage forward design and what that really means. There's been some expressed interest of whether or not we want to encourage or discourage or kind of reduce that garage forward design. So just as a frame of reference, this is what we kind of mean when we talk about a garage forward design. This is what I would refer to in a former life as a snout house. You've got that big long nose just sticking out there, right? There are other types of garage forward design that aren't as prevalent, but when we've been looking at these two, there's ones that it's really garage forward, and then there's ones that are garage forward, but also that it's a dominant garage, that there's more percentage of that garage front than living front. And I've heard there's a desire to at least explore reducing the mass of garages. And two ways to do that is to pull garages back or reduce the amount of frontage that they would have. So one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting were setbacks and allowing a house to be 25 feet, but requiring your garage to be 30 feet. And it was this highlighted area that kind of got a little bit of a, hey, let's explore that a little bit. Staff had thrown in that the garage would need to be 6 feet behind the front line of a house. The whole idea is we would require some sort of recessed design. So this is a pretty typical recessed design. This portion of the garage, maybe this portion, is about 6 feet behind that front porch. Again, you're placing that focus on the house and you're pushing that garage design back. Some different ways to do this and look at garage setbacks and design is to require detached garages, and everybody can laugh, ha ha ha, we live in Minnesota. How would we ever detach garages? It happens, that's one tool. Require
there's a
recess.
large part of the U.S. north of the Mason-Dixon that has detached garages.
There is. And I think it's also that, you know, is a garage a right in a place like this? Do we have to have them attached? I don't know. Requiring them recessed, limiting the front facade percentage, and the condition, if they're going to be garage design forward, conditioning them in certain ways. So again, that recess requirement here is one that's that kind of almost 6 foot. The garage is back behind the front line of the porch. This one doesn't have any sort of requirement that the garage is less than the living space, whereas this one allows for the garage in front, or maybe it's in line with, but there's a limited mass area there. That frontage is, there's a percentage of that frontage that is garage. Here's another one where we require the garage to be recessed and that garage space to be limited. So this one looks like no greater than 50% of that total front facade. Other options include limiting the amount of forward. So this is just, all we care is that there's a post in front of it. It's not much of a house in front of a garage, where others would say if the garage is going to be in front, it can't be more than maybe 10 feet. And then lastly, another option is just side-loaded garages. So I'm going to pause just a moment on our fancy snout house and long garage thing to say, is this really a thing for us? Do we want to require that the garages are recessed? Do we want to require that there's a limited percentage of a front facade of garage? I've heard some that say this is important, and I've heard others like, why would we care? Let's not be so crazy. Thoughts?
I would prefer limiting how far that garage sticks out. I mean, if we 5-6 feet, I'm okay with that. The one you show is a perfect example of what I would want to avoid. The one on the left there, that green one. But the one on the right, I mean, that probably sits proud of the house, I don't know, 5-6 feet. It's a lot of garage out there. I think the architecture around the garage makes a big difference. Having the brick, having the windows, can do a lot. You, again, look back at that house on the left, the green one, and it's very, very ordinary architecturally. So that also detracts from it, I think.
My 2 cents is, I would encourage us to have house forward, like we're talking about allowing that at 25 feet and then the garage at 30 feet. And this has got a lot of garage on the right. And what I'm more nervous about is as we get down to these 65-foot wide lots with a 7.5 side, we're down to a 50-foot. It gets pretty tough to get much more garage and some kind of a house. What I don't want to see is a doorway. And you'll see this on the narrower lots and on the lake primarily. They're on a narrow lot. They're trying to get as much garage as they can, and they have no more than a front door. So as we move to these smaller lots and we have sidewalks out there, we're expecting people to be walking up and down these trails and these sidewalks, and it just looks more neighborhoodish when you have a design, I think, that has house forward, or a lot closer to the front of the garage versus on the left, where it looks like just about the entire garage is forward of the house.
I would have trouble finding the front door on that house.
On this one here?
Yeah.
But have sidewalks.
Commissioner Kubal, did you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm actually, I'm sensitive to that concern, but I still think if people didn't like these kind of houses, they wouldn't move in those kind of neighborhoods. And so curb appeal is kind of in the beholder and what they're looking for and how they want to use their property and get the most value out of it. Now, to me, the difference in these two is still they're both garage forward. The one on the right looks better, but I also think that that one would be more costly to actually build and might price somebody out of a home of a similar nature just by all the fancy bells and whistles that give it a little bit more curb appeal. So, you know, I spent a lot of time in neighborhoods where homes looked cookie cutter, and at first it really drove me crazy. Where's the individuality of every home? But the longer I lived there, the more accustomed I became to that, and the OCD in me then decided I liked it better. So I'm not so sure. I think we need to have setbacks and things like that, but I don't know if maybe we can have different, and I don't want to say different standards, but I think that builders will build things that people want to buy, and people will move into homes that fit how they view the world, or how they view their homes and their neighborhoods. So I don't know if that's something we should kind of necessarily say, we need to have it this way. That's just my 2 cents.
And I'm not as fixated on garage forward or otherwise. My fixation is on the smaller lots and the smaller setbacks. But our developer told us he's gonna build every house on the same footprint. Every house in those divisions that they control, east of Goodview, will have exactly the same footprint, because that's their, it's sort of like stamping out lots and lots of, I don't wanna say cookies. Just, you just stamp this out, and nobody has to think about it, because you save a lot of money by having everything standard. Everything that you buy is cut to the same lengths. You have the same amount of concrete of cement to buy, the whole 9 yards. So my concern is more making sure that there's room between houses for people to have some space, to have a garden on the side of the house. I've been talking to a lot of folks who are saying to me, I really need to put something next to my house, but there's no sun in there because they're too close together. 3-story house, 3-story, 2.5-story house, small area, you really don't get sun.
Yeah, but depending on what side of the street you're on, you might need 100 feet for doing the gardening.
Right.
And that's not practical either. You would, if you really want to do that, you're going to buy your house with the sun and think about all those things when you buy it. So, I understand that too.
They don't think about that.
No, it's not until after the fact, but.
So if I don't, just as a quick thing, I don't hear a majority that was really concerned about garage forward design. Right now, the setback for a house would be 25 feet. The setback for a house or garage would be 30. That does not preclude a property owner or a builder from building an entire house 30 feet back with a ranch style.
Right.
And so as long as we're okay with that, then we all know that maybe could encourage some more design considerations, where some could be ranch set 30 feet back, some could be closer to the street with the house, but the garage is recessed. Okay. All right, I'm gonna just keep on trucking along then. The other thing that we've been talking about is agricultural compatible complementary land uses. So we talked about how we can preserve some of our rural agricultural values while we do still have that increased development pressure. And so this is really not so much those areas that are guided for the MXR1, but those areas that are really guided for the agricultural zone. So we're really looking at true far southwest, for the most part, of Forest Lake, even maybe some south on the west side of Highway 61. So we talked about how we might be able to do that, and a couple things that the commission had kind of settled on. We're looking at accessory dwelling units, event wedding venues, and the possibility of winery, distillery, breweries. So again, these would be things that could help offset an existing farming practices or a family farm that may not want to farm anymore, but may need some sort of complementary or supplemental income. So moving into accessory dwelling units, we talked about that these would be a smaller independent residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a standalone detached single-family home. The materials that were included for your packet today, those did also approve a little bit on that definition, requiring that they would be constructed on a permanent foundation. Again, that would kind of get us away from that question of, can Ma stay in the RV in the back? This is really just one of those, we are building, for lack of a different phrase, tinier homes. Maybe not tiny homes, but smaller homes that would be complementary to that single-family residential use. So at our last meeting, we talked about just those We would allow them in the agricultural and potentially rural residential zoning district. The materials that were sent out to you in the additional supplement on Friday I can give you a paper copy before you
Isn't
leave
that it?
tonight. That is it. Perfect.
I got it tonight.
That we would first start with the agricultural district, and it seems like there's popularity, we'd look into the rural residential district. We would require these on homesteaded properties, and that the property needs to have a minimum lot area of 5 acres. The idea being we need a more significantly sized lot than allowing them on smaller urban lots for sure, but lots that might not be able to accommodate this additional dwelling unit. So earlier tonight, you looked at a parcel of land and they were having some septic challenges. 5 acres or greater are more than likely going to be able to meet some of those demands that an additional dwelling could place upon a property.
Abby, on the,
Yeah.
what is our minimum acreage on a rural residential? Do you know? Is it? I
On
don't-
rural residential, it's 5.
It is 5.
So if we decided to change this and go with both agricultural and rural residential, we wouldn't have to have a standard for both. It would be 5 acres regardless of those 2 districts.
Thank you.
Only one of these would be permitted per eligible property regardless of acreage. I know there was concern about building tiny house communes and party areas and that sort of thing. I think it's reasonable to say we can provide for an additional living unit for a family member, or maybe a rental, or some sort of agro-tourism B&B. Who knows? But we wouldn't want to start off with more than one. This would be just a slow start, and maybe we'd consider differently in the future. They would have shared driveway access and shared utilities, and those utility connections could go through the primary residence. This is more of that's written down, but then we would also charge our water and our sewer connection fees as per any other dwelling unit. We start to talk about footprint size. We indicate that the footprint,
We wouldn't have sack and whack on,
probably not in those
I
agricultural
don't think we
districts.
have either. Maybe the fringe hits sewer, but there'd be no water.
And I'm not sure the applicability, but
Because there's no sack and whack if you're doing a septic in a well, correct?
Correct.
yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Where the services would be available, you'd have those connection charges. The footprint would not exceed 800 square feet. So again, we're trying to limit the size. Yes, Commissioner Young?
I'm seeing here the square footage size shall not exceed 75% of the principal dwelling square footage. And that seems pretty big to me. Ditto with
Okay.
the one down the maximum second floor. So basically, you've got 2 full-size houses on a 5-acre lot.
Well, so you'd have a footprint size of 800 square feet,
The next line down.
Okay?
and the total size of a structure, so first floor, second floor, could not exceed 75%. We certainly can reduce both of those numbers.
I'm more, so you've got a 3,000 square foot footprint of the primary structure. Does it go by the 75% or does it go by the 800 square feet?
It would be 800 square feet would be your maximum footprint size.
Whichever is more restrictive.
We can reevaluate those 2 standards.
I'm just,
So what I
to me,
would,
they're very different.
Sure.
And so if I was thinking about building something, I would say, oh, I can do 75% of my principal structure.
you could do 75% of your principal structure, but your footprint could not exceed 800 square feet. So it's probably a either-or circumstance, and we can reevaluate that.
I don't care if it's reevaluated, I just need it to be clear.
Yep.
Which it is.
Yeah, well,
So-
Well,
Could be both.
no,
It could be
it's
if it's a
whatever one's more
two-story.
restrictive. So let's say you have somebody who has an 800 square foot house currently. The max they could build would be 600 square feet because that's 75%.
And
But
they've
You
got-
can't build an 800.
but if they had a 3,000 square foot home, they could have a footprint of 800 square feet with maybe that second story that adds additional living space to not exceed 75% of the primary residence. maybe that's all too confusing, and we just say, these can't be greater than 800 combined square feet. Or
Can I
500.
just make another comment on this? So, you know, as you think about, like, practically speaking, if I have questions and I'm a property owner, you're gonna have to file a building permit regardless of the regulations, or you should be, right?
Thank you.
Or you're gonna get a stop work order, and you're gonna have a zoning review of the requests. And so the zoning department at that time could be assessing, okay, you know, and at that time of the building permit application, if you're doing things correctly, you're gonna be receiving a phone call from the zoning department saying, hey, it looks like you're proposing to do something that's not quite in line with the city code, and here's how you can adjust it to meet it.
But the 800 is the footprint, and the 75% is a living area square footage. So they're two different calculations, and apples and oranges, and you're thinking they're both apples and apples, I think.
Well,
But
we've got
they're both
the,
limiting. One, I mean, this additional dwelling unit may be just a one-story unit, so the 800 could be both, but the living area still has to fall within the 75% of what the primary is, and it could still be the 800.
And maybe what that is that we need to redefine against square footage, footprint, and living area and footprint.
because to me, as I read this, I can have I can have my principal dwelling, I'm just gonna say 3,000 square feet, and I'm coming down here, and the square footage of my accessory has to be 75% of that.
Maybe.
Maybe, all right? And then maybe what you need to say is 75% not to exceed 800 square feet, so that I know.
I can reevaluate how, this isn't the last time.
Story. 'cause-
That's down there in the second,
Oh,
there's a
okay,
second,
okay.
they've got
Okay.
the second story on here.
Okay, okay.
With the
None
second
of us
story
are as
not
rich
to
as
exceed
you,
75% of the primary. The idea being to
None
have
of us are
some,
as rich as you, building 2,200 square foot accessory dwelling unit.
Have you seen some of the stuff that's going up on 200?
yeah.
Oh, my stars and garters.
Yeah, these aren't small houses that we're building anymore. I'll tell you those bullet points regarding the 75% for total, 75% first floor and the 800 square feet. We'll reevaluate those to see what some of the industry standards.
I just want it to be clear if it's either or
Yeah.
both, or
Sure.
it was confuzzling.
Is 75% of a principal dwelling, so if you had a 3,000 square foot structure, would we want to see a 2,000 square foot accessory dwelling?
No?
Now,
Because my first question was, boy, 75% sounds really high.
Great. Sometimes I add these things in just to see if you're paying attention.
Oh, I'm, Abby, I'm crushed.
All right, parking. Provided they have parking for the single-family dwelling, they would not be required to provide additional parking. Again, we're looking at 5-acre parcels. There's parking. There's parking at most places on these. Commissioner Young, do you have comment about that?
I think that there's parking, but is it hard surface parking? And in our code, parking is hard surface parking. It's not the south lawn. It's not,
it's not hardscape and agriculture though, right?
And that's the thing, I can double check.
So, yeah, the surfacing requirement is more relaxed in the agricultural district. I still think you're gonna typically have a surface. You're not
not
gonna,
on the
They
rural
require-
estate. Rural estate, I believe, they do require hard surface.
We can look into that.
They require, I'm just,
Requiring a surfacing material, if that's something that's concerning to the commission. Anyone? Anyone care? Anyone? No? It's getting late. Principal structure, again, same water and sewer or septic connection, again, that we're connecting to the same utility, so we can't split these two houses apart in the future. And then meet minimum building code requirements. A lot of the other stuff that you see in the code sections that I included were clean up. You know, a lot of areas will say, you can or cannot do this. A lot of these are, with the exception of an accessory dwelling unit, you can't live in an outbuilding. Go ahead,
Going
Commissioner
back to
Stewart.
the septic, are we concerned, like, you know, they built this house originally, they got their septic system in, now they decide to build this accessory dwelling unit. mean, do they have to be
They-
able to prove that it's
Yes.
properly designed to adequate for both? Okay.
Yes, yep, and that is something that is a requirement of our building code to make sure that they are adequately serviced by the sewage system, whatever that may be, either septic or sewer, even sewer line connections can sometimes be undersized. So staff has a little bit of direction, some edits, that was so far was, hey, we're keeping moving forward with this. Any additional thoughts or comments you might have regarding this?
When we get to, if we decide to do rural residential.
Yep.
And ag might be the same, you need to be, you only get so many structures per.
There is,
So I think at 5 acre, you only get one accessory structure.
you get two, and that's where we did indicate on the last page of the, I'll double check on that one. We
Not
intended,
including a single permitted accessory structure, the maximum number of accessory structures is as follows, but it doesn't say anything.
I think it's as follows, and it's a ... There's two total, I believe. I only included the size, but I can include that language for you so you know what that limitation is.
So it's a single family then only allows one accessory?
Correct. Or a detached garage and a small shed.
Yeah.
So it's those
Regardless
two.
of acreage?
When it comes to the agricultural, I think it's 2 detached buildings plus a shed. So
Right.
this would allow,
Under 20 acres, but at 20 acres, it's kind of.
yeah, there's acreage
Yeah,
limitations.
And
This
the
would,
rural residential allows 2 at 5?
I would have to, we can get you that
We just
information.
need to check that.
Yep, we can, the intent was to allow for these in addition to the outbuildings you might have as part of your agricultural operations. I have enough direction. I'm just gonna quickly, I had showed you earlier this year code amendment. Yes, Commissioner Young.
I just need to call out one more time because we went through there really fast. G1A1.
G1A1.
We are doubling our density by saying that a sewer and water lot shall be 7,500 square feet instead of 15,000 square feet.
I didn't go through the
Right.
actual MXR
Right,
code
and-
changes,
but-
so.
But I just, that's something that I will continue to call out, that we are looking at really significantly increased density for everything that we're building from now forward.
Everything that would be built in the MXR1, these would be the minimum standards.
Yeah.
Yep.
They could go bigger if they wanted.
On that note, they could. It's a very, it's a fact. It is a minimum standard. Earlier this year, we talked about this code amendment process. We discussed in August, review an ordinance in September. We'd consider an ordinance at last month's meeting, and we'd be adopting an ordinance today. Ha, 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 ha. Or considering adoption today. We have an updated kind of MXR and ADU code amendment process. It was staff's hope that we'd have ordinance for consideration for you at your next meeting. You're going to hear in my staff comments that we have a lot of other things in store for you at the next meeting. And so it's likely that the ordinance formal public hearings would be in January. And then additional code amendment, we'd be looking at agricultural amendment. The whole idea of wineries, distilleries, that sort of stuff is going to take a little bit more flushing of some of those appropriate standards that we'd want to see in those. So that's going to take a little bit more time, and I wanted to kind of get through MXR1, ADU, put that to bed, then move into some of this other agricultural compatible land uses. So those aren't off the table right now, but we're going to just slow up on those to kind of get through with MXR1 and ADU.
On
Yes.
your chart you got now.
Yeah.
The agricultural amendment discussion is September through December of '22.
I just didn't
Ordinance
change
review, I think you mean January of
23
'23?
for the rest of that arrow going forward, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just clarifying, because
she's
I'm kind
really
of stupid
good.
on this stuff.
That's all I have for you. I have enough direction to move forward.
All right. We'll move to our other section. Before we start down the line with everyone, I was approached by city that there is an awful lot of items on the December meeting. 9 is the,
There's an anticipation, we believe there could be 9
so there's
private
some thought,
applications.
would it be possible for us to have a second meeting with the first meeting being the
December 7th, the
7th?
first Wednesday of the
So we
month.
would meet the first and second Wednesday in December.
That would try to keep us out of kind of that holiday, once we get to the 21st, we're getting into that week right before Christmas that people tend to.
Are we running up against the 60-day rule? Is that why you've got so much in this, on
No.
that December meeting?
These
or
are all new applications we anticipate will be submitted by Monday's deadline.
So we can't push them in the January because of the 60-day rule?
We could, it's just generally we try to review our applications in a timely fashion. Yes, we have 60 days, however, we
It
do
goes
have an
quickly.
obligation to kind of process things.
I understand that, but folks that have applications know that we meet twice a month. I mean, yeah, I'll be here, but it would be good if this was not to become the norm.
No, I mean, the reason that the consideration for an additional meeting is because we cancel a meeting in December. We don't traditionally have 2 meetings in November and December. If we had 2 meetings, I think that would have spaced out some of these application submissions.
And it's not that we cancel the meeting, it's that, like most other organizations, we tend not to meet in the last 2 weeks of November and the last 2 weeks of December. That's,
Land use and planning doesn't stop for holidays, right?
those engineering firms, yes, sir. They're pretty vacant.
Yeah, they all work from home now, so.
Yeah.
So is December 7th, I really want to know, can we get a quorum here?
Well, yeah,
I
and
gotta check my calendar out.
we won't know until Monday what that workload is. Tuesday, we'll be spending our morning going through things with a fine-tooth comb to see if they are complete application submittals, because if they're not complete, we really don't want to be even bringing them forth before you. The Shadow Creek tonight, we had already scheduled that public hearing. We wanted to get some of those big things out into your eye, but really we want, if we have the opportunity or there's an application submittal missing something, we would push them into January or a later date when we'd have a complete submission.
We do know we have 2 complete ones right now. And developers have been meeting with us and saying, yeah, we're coming in. So that's why we're anticipating 8, 9, 10 applications.
I know that I have a really ugly St. Paul City Council meeting on December 7th. They start at 3:30. It is my hope that I will be high in the agenda and I will be out of there at a reasonable time.
So it sounds like Commissioner Young can't be guaranteed, and that is
Right.
just fine.
I
what el-
hope I'd be here by 8 or 8:30. Please do, dear goddess.
What we can do is after we hear on Monday what our application submittal is, we go through them on Tuesday. We might make some personal phone calls to see your availability if we need to have that meeting, that additional meeting in December. It would be our hope to front load that meeting in December, that it would be a lot of those really easier items that we can process pretty quickly, maybe a few innocuous site plan reviews. We do have at least one, if not 2, zoning text amendments. One may be a little easier than another or something. We'd try to really tailor that so that additional meeting, ideally, neither of them would go to 9:30, but.
I'll try. Hey, last time I got surprised. You know,
Right.
I thought I was,
We will do our best we will reach out to you early next week to confirm, but if you could check your calendars for your availability and let us know if you don't think you could be here. I would agree with Chair Gerard that we can't schedule the meeting if we don't have a quorum, so. And I can check with the other commissioners that aren't here tonight.
All right, so moving on the other, do we have Councilperson Munson here this evening?
She's not here.
All right, then we'll start with Abby. Anything else for us?
No, other than the last meeting, you talked, we heard some concern about an email that you got from payroll or BSNA. So what had happened is when the city switched you to city issued emails, because you are compensated generously, right? I think, for the record, it is a very nominal fee to be here tonight. I think it breaks down to poverty wages when you're volunteering
We're not
for
even
us.
close to poverty.
Right. But
Fortunately, Forest Lake does not have a minimum wage ordinance.
so we, well, it's a volunteer stipend, folks. Anyways,
Moving on.
moving on. When you receive those, our payroll folks updated their records to include your new city email in their payroll system. And that was your first email that went out from BSNA. You may have received another one from Katie Smith directly, or FL Payroll or HR, I'm not sure, that says, hey, that was us. Don't worry, it's not spam. Let us know if you keep receiving any sort of funky emails. Forward them even to us. We can explore that for you. I know that there's still a couple commissioners that are having trouble with their email. We did try, Mr. Gerard's Chair Gerard's tonight. I'd encourage you to click on Outlook when you get home tonight and see if that works in a different environment. If not, we do.
It did work here.
If not, we can get you in touch with our IT to try to see if we can get you guys set up.
No, because when you call IT, they don't answer the phone and they say that they'll call you back, but then they don't call you back, so you, never mind.
Okay, well,
We're not special.
Give you a lifeline, Susan.
there you go. That's all I have tonight, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I got names.
Questions for Abby?
No.
No. All right. Nathan?
No updates from me, thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
It's been about 6 weeks. I'm still enjoying it, so it's,
We'd like to hear.
we
You
haven't
keep
scared
showing
off
up.
yet.
And you've got a couple new ordinances on the agenda, correct? They're an animal waste management ordinance.
Those are requirements as part of our MS4 permitting requirements, and so they've been filtered through Public Works.
Perfect. Karen?
No updates really, except to say that elections went very smoothly. So happy about that. It was good.
Geneva?
Well, I would just like to say thank you guys for staying for this whole meeting, and I'm actually kind of new on the Planning Commission, and I really want to hear from people, and I know it's not always comfortable for people to get up, but thank you. We're listening, we hear.
Can I just piggyback really quick for those that are in the room and those that are online? We do have a vacancy on the commission, and applications can be accepted at any time for those that like to read the comp plan in their free time.
Hint. And who may have deep ties to the community.
That's right. That's right. That'd be more your style.
I don't know what was said when I was out,
That's fine.
I want to say thank you.
Don, anything?
No, nothing.
Susan? Nope. Chair is nothing. So chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Susan always looks to me to second, so I'll second.
It's a non-debatable motion, so we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for your service this evening. Thank you for the city for attending with smiles.